Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Professional Bookworms, the worst titled booktube channel on the face of the planet. Today, I'm going to be ranking every single book within the Cosmere by Brandon Sanderson, which is one of my favorite series of all time. I do believe if you take the entire Cosmere into account, it's going to be my third favorite series. And if you just take the Stormlight Archive, it would be my second favorite series, quite easily. And I love the series. So, without further ado, I'm just going to explain some stuff and then we'll just get right into it. Well, first of all, as you can see, I have a tier for the mediocre short stories, which I don't feel like ranking because they're really short and I have no opinions on them. And I would be surprised if very many people did have something to say about them, but we'll see. And well, we have like the basic SABCD ranking, but we also have at the top the best book, which is just the number one, easily like my favorite in the entire Cosmere, which you will see as we go on. Also, I put the Stormlight Archive at the end just because that is my favorite part of the entire Cosmere. So my top five is just going to be a Stormlight ranking. So that's going to be the last thing I rank. Um, so without further ado, let's get into the first book that I read in the Cosmere, and which is a starting point for a lot of people getting into the Cosmere, which is Mistborn: The Final Empire. And I really like The Final Empire. Of course, there's a special experience that I have associated with it. It being my first Cosmere book and also one of the first epic fantasy books I've ever read. I love it. I have gone down on it a little bit. At the point at which I read it, it was my favorite book of all time. It's not that anymore. It's not even close, really. But it still holds a really special place in my heart. First of all, even if this isn't Sanderson's best character work, uh, I still really I still really love a lot of the characters in this, specifically Vin, Caesar, and Kelsier. Some other characters I don't really love until books two and three, and then that's still only one. Along with that, I just think there's a couple of weaknesses that this book has, especially some Deus Ex Machina stuff towards the end. There's also, well, actually, it's kind of it. I really it's just a really solid introduction to the world, and there's a reason that this is one of the most recommended starting points to the entire Cosmere. And I really love this book. It's just not my favorite anymore, and this is actually my least favorite of the original Mistborn trilogy, which leads us right into my favorite, which is the Well of Ascension, which I personally absolutely love. Well of Ascension is a book that got a lot more criticism than I expected it to. And the reason that a lot of other people don't really like it seems to be the reason that I love it, which is it's more like political kind of narrative, and also it's pacing. And I love the pacing of this book personally. It feels like there's always something just getting worse throughout the entire book, and that tension building is just brilliant, I feel like. And there's a reason it is my favorite. Sometimes the third book, the Hero of Ages, I just go ahead and write the Hero of Ages. Sometimes on some days, the Hero of Ages is my favorite, just because of the emotional impact it had. But when I take it in as a book, as a whole, like the entire book, then Well of Ascension would be my favorite. Because if you take if you break them into like who has the best beginning, middle, and end, uh, Mistborn had the Final Empire would have like the second best beginning, the second best middle, and the second best ending. I mean, the second best ending. Yeah. Then the Hero of Ages would have probably like the worst beginning, the worst middle, and the best ending. Whereas Well of Ascension has the best beginning, middle, and the worst end, and its ending is still incredible because it's a Sanderson book. So yeah, I just really love the Well of Ascension. Again, this makes one of the characters who I didn't really love in the first book one of my favorites in this entire series, and it adds a lot to the overarching plot of Mistborn. I love Well of Ascension, and then The Hero of Ages is just a really great book. It's devastating. I don't know how it'll hit on us reread, but like from what I remember, like the ending was completely bonkers. It was like my first true experience of like a complete Sanderlands. Like everything came together so perfectly towards the end of The Hero of Ages that it just has to be a favorite with Sanderson. And I love so much about this book. I feel like we lose a couple of the things that I really loved about Final Empire and the Well of Ascension, but I feel like it also makes up for that like tenfold with some of the stuff that it pulls off really well. This has a plot line with a character who didn't get as much focus in the first two, and I really like that plot line. It's not my favorite, but I still do really enjoy it, and it brings an end to a couple character arcs and a couple different plot lines and a lot of plot lines. Like this is it's actually genuinely impressive just how well plotted this entire trilogy is and how perfectly the Hero of Ages brings together all those different threads that this book has, the series has. So yeah, that's my ranking for the original Miss Marvel trilogy. Right after that, we'll just be ranking a couple standalones within the Cosmere, including the newly released Isles of the Emberdark. So we'll start with Elantris. Elantris is a solid B tier book. I do really enjoy Elantris. It is clearly one of his weaker books, though. Just because Elantris is, it's all right. Again, outside of Stormlight and a couple other books, I wouldn't say the characters is one of his strong suits, and this book definitely falls prey to that. The most interesting character in this book would be like a B tier Stormlight character, and um and a lot of people, and I just think it's really well paced, Challenges, and the ending, of course, is really well written, but it's just not my favorite. I do like the main characters a bit more than most people seem to, but I still don't love them, and because of that, it just falls into B tier. Because it is a good book, but it is quite clearly like his first book. Because this is the this is like you can notice that in his writing style, his character writing, and a lot of times it feels like a prototype Way of Kings, which is funny because there are a lot of prototype Way of Kingses and Cosmere. Like we have Dragon Steel Prime, we have the Way of Kings Prime, and I think he did a couple other drafts of Way of Kings until he finally wrote what is the actual Way of Kings. So yeah, Elendris is a really good book. It's just not a great book. Warbreaker goes into A tier. Uh, this is a book that I feel like I would like more on a reread, but I did still really, really enjoy Warbreaker. I think it's a very well written book. I think this is kind of where he like this is like the midpoint between Mistborn and Stormlight. So it's like first of all, Elaine Chess was the beginning. Then after that, he wrote the Mistborn trilogy, and then in between Mistborn, Stormlight, and the Wheel of Time, he wrote this, and it feels like a bridge between that because this feels like where he really came into his own as a writer, and you can tell by reading it. I think out of the ones that we've spoken about so far, this has quite easily the weakest ending. There is one part of the ending that wraps up a specific character arc, and I did it, and I think it did that amazingly. The rest of the ending though is okay, but it's not my favorite Sanderson ending by a long shot. But the rest of this book is really well written. I like the basic premise of it and how it handles that. I like what it adds to Cosmere as a whole. I really like the magic system of Warbreaker. I like the world of Nalthis, but it's not my favorite. And but yeah, Warbreaker is just a pretty good book in my opinion. It's a really good book in my opinion. Um, Lightsong is like quite easily the best character in this, but there are some other contenders, uh, and I do really like this book. Right after that, there's Chess of the Emerald Sea, which goes near the top of A tier. I really love Chess just because it is so fun. There's not a single moment with this book that I'm just not enjoying it completely. The reason it's lower than Well of Ascension and maybe okay, no, I'll put it under Hero of Ages. And under Well Extension and Hero of Ages is just because I think it didn't hit the emotional highs of the book, or and that Sanderson is able to usually hit. Uh, but it is such a fun book. I love the writing style of this book just because this is narrated by a character who is very important to the overall Cosmere, and it was so fun seeing him in this book narrate this. And I'm pretty sure he said it was practice for when he would have to write in that character's voice in the future. And if we get anything like this again, I will be all for it. And along with that, it's just a really fun book. It's not my favorite, but I do really, really, really love it. After that, we have Yumi and Nightmare Painter, and that is going to be our first S tier. Uh, so I think Yumi and the Nightmare Painter is brilliant. What I usually say about Sanderson's writing, which is like while he may not have like the best writing style on the planet, I still think I like his writing style more than most people. Um, Yumi, like what he's able to do, he is a really immersive writer in my opinion. Like, uh, there's only a couple writers who I would put above him in that category, which is like Robin Hobb, Joe Abercrombie, and a couple others. But I think he's actually really good at doing that. Maybe, but like, and a lot of the time it's just because the worlds that he's writing are somewhat dark. Because that I have that with the Way of Kings, I have that with Mistborn. Um, you mean the Nightmare Painter is not a particularly dark planet, uh, but the vibe that this book is able to convey just through the characters and just through the way he writes the world is written perfectly. I think the ending of this book is somewhat controversial, but I did really enjoy it just because of what it does for the character arc within the book. And I also I feel like I really enjoy when Sanderson specifically talks about art, which you'll see in another book that I'm going to talk about later. And this is like one of the best glimpses of that. Uh, and he does that really well in this book. There's some incredible emotional beats in this book. It feels cozy, which is weird to say because if you've read the book, there are like well, there are points where it's cozy, there are points where it's not. But at the time, this was like the closest thing I had ever gotten to cozy fantasy, and I found it really well written. I really like both of the main characters. It's surprising that this is an S tier for me because it's a romance, and I don't usually like romances that much. But uh, for some reason, this one I really enjoyed. So yeah, Yumi and the Nightmare Painter is easily an S tier. I love this book from beginning to end. And yeah, I can't wait for to reread this one just because first of all, I love the vibe that it gives off, and I just want to see this world again. If I had to choose a Sanderson world to live on, this would be the one because all the other ones are like hellscapes. So uh, right after that, we have the Sunlit Man, which is going to be unfortunately our first D tier. I do not like the Sunlit Man. I find it forgettable. Uh, and that's its biggest crime for me because while there are other books that like there are other books that I've read, not Sanderson, that I like less. Um, Sunland Man is just forgettable. Like I paid a good amount of attention to this book, and for some reason, I just cannot tell you what happened in it. So that's a problem for me. Second of all, it's just not engaging to me. Like I could not bring myself to care about any of the characters in this. The best I could do was just like the only thing that kept this from being even lower is probably just actually this is the lowest it gets, but the only thing that kept me from liking it even less is that I really like the Cosmere connections and I really like the world that it was set on. Again, another problem I have with Sunlight Man is that it's just a really action-packed book, and first of all, I don't usually like a lot of action like an incredible amount of action. And second of all, I don't think the action in this book is particularly engaging at all. So yeah, because of that, it's a D tier. I wish I liked it more. I just can't, in good conscience, say I do. It's easily the Sanderson book that I just don't remember anything about. I do remember a good amount, but if you ask me to give you a plot summary of what happened, I would genuinely struggle telling you what happened in this book. So one thing I did appreciate is that it contextualized a lot of stuff that was happening in Wind and Truth while I was reading that book for the first time, and it made some parts of Wind and Truth a bit more enjoyable just because of the mystery it added, because of the knowledge of what we know of Sun and Man. So because of that, that's another thing that gives it an edge up. But if the only thing that I like about your book is just that it kind of improves another book a little bit, uh, I don't think it's a particularly good book. So I do not like the Sunlit Man very much. And yeah, after that we'll go into Idols of the Emberdark. I really, really, really like Idols of the Emberdark. This is a news release. The reason I'm doing this now is just because, like, first of all, we're not going to be getting another Sanderson release for a while, and so it feels like this is a good point to get. And I also remember I just came out and I read it and I really, really enjoyed it. I think the first 100 pages or so of this book are just really well written. I love them so much. And if the rest of the book lived up to those heights, it would have easily been an S tier Sanderson book. It didn't, and I still really enjoyed the rest of this book, but it just didn't get there. What this book did really impressively is that it made Six of the Dusk like a favorite, like an all-time Cosmere favorite. He would be up there. He would just be under a couple Stormlight characters. That's it. I love this character. The other POV character is Starling, and I didn't love Starling just because I think she's a good character. I don't think she's a great character. And because because of that, the side characters in our plotline are even less engaging, and I think they might be some of the worst characters Sanderson's ever written. Just because, first of all, their dialogue feels unnatural. Like whenever they are speaking to each other, I just don't enjoy the sections, which is I'm fine with because honestly, there's a lot less of them than I expected in this book. But I just didn't like those characters at all, and I don't think they're well written at all. Um, so that dragged the book down a lot for me. Um, and I did like Starling towards the as the book went on, but that didn't really save her plotline. I was engaged in Starling, but I didn't care about any of her crew members. So that's like my main problem with Isles of the Emberdark. Outside of that, Dusk's plotline was brilliant the whole way through. I still think the first 100 pages of that plotline were the best part of it, and because of that, nothing else really gets there. Some parts towards the end, um, really got close, but it didn't quite reach there. And I think the final, like the absolute ending of this book, felt a bit abrupt. That's my problem. Again, that might be just me, but we'll see. So yeah, I do really enjoy All of the Dark. I do have my problems with it, but what I loved about this book, I really loved. After that, we have Six of the Dusk, which I'm gonna put in A tier again. I think this novella was specifically improved by the reading experience of Isles of the Emberdark. Because if you don't know, the first Isles of the Emberdark is split up into different books, into different parts, like most Sanderson books are. And throughout the first book, there's like an alternating thing, which is just like a present day chapter and a chapter of Sixth of Dusk. And I feel like that reading experience specifically elevated Six of the Dusk to a level that I love Six of the Dusk now. But just because I find the reading experience of Isle of the Emberdark plus Six of the Dusk better, I'm putting it at the bottom of it here. But I do still really enjoy. I feel like I shouldn't be ranking Six of the Dusk at all because it's already included in Emberdark, but it was here in the tier list. So, what can you do? Then Shadows for Silence in the Forest of Hell is probably gonna go right up. It's probably gonna be at top of B tier. It's been a while since I've read this one, so I don't know if my opinion on it is completely trustworthy. But what I do remember, I really enjoyed. I also like the mystery it's set up for, like the overall Cosmere. I do like the world, and I do like the characters. Um, I don't remember a lot about this one, but I do remember really liking it. So yeah, Six Plus goes into top of B tier. I do think actually maybe under Needle Angels. We'll see on reread. Then after that we get into Mistborn Era 2. Uh, the Alloy of Law goes middle of B tier or maybe even C tier. No way. Hmm. It's gonna go in middle of B tier. Alloy of Law is my least favorite Mistborn book. I still do really enjoy it just because I really like the characters of Wax, Wayne, and Marcy, and this book feels like the foundation for those characters going forward. And I feel like they just get better as the series goes on. But I still do really like them in this book. I had a lot of fun reading this book. It feels like you could just do it in a sitting. Like it's not a short book. It is a short book for Sanderson, but it's not a short book. But it feels like you could read it in a setting and you wouldn't miss a lot. And I do think uh, this is easily the weakest of the Miss Bond books by a long shot. But I still do really enjoy it. And like the farther I get away from it, I think I like it more in retrospect than I did reading it for the first time. So again, I'm interested to see how that goes on reread. Um, But yeah, I Love Law is a really good book. It's not, again, it's my least favorite in this one, but that's just because I had a couple problems with it. It was also a really short book, and it was setting up. It was originally going to be a novella, and I feel like you can feel that in certain parts of the book. And for that reason, I think that the rest of Better Two is a lot better, just because it feels like it was supposed to be that story. Um, Moving on from there, we have Shadows of Self, which is quite easily my favorite Mistborn Era 2 book. I love Shadows of Self so much. It is just a great book the whole way through, and especially the ending of this book is devastating. I love it. Um, One of the most unexpected plot twists I've ever come across, but it hit so hard and so much harder than I expected it to, based on how much I attached to these characters. And because of the ending of this book, I felt closer to the characters too. I love Shadows of Self, especially on retrospect. I said maybe you could read Aloe of Law in one sitting. I basically binged all of Shadows of Self in two sittings. It's that good. I love Shadows of Self. Um, and it sets up a lot of stuff to come for the rest of era 2 that I feel is invaluable. A really interesting story about this one and the next book, the Bands of Mourning, is that I'm pretty sure he wrote them back to back. Actually, I'm pretty sure like he wrote the first half of Shadows of Self, then couldn't then had got distracted by something else, and then when he had to come back to write Shadows of Self, he just couldn't, so he wrote the entirety of Bats of Warning and then came back to Shadows of Self. And that's really interesting because I never felt like a disconnect throughout the entire book, but I find that to be a really fun little story. Speaking of which, Bats of Morning goes right above Six to the Dust. I really, really love Bands of Morning. Not quite as much as Shadows of Self, but it is my second favorite Era 2 book. Just because, like, first of all, it takes a character who I didn't have very many opinions on in the first two books and makes her an absolute favorite of the entire Cosmere. Um, she's just a great character in this and the next book. Um, along with that, uh, I just really, really like what it did for Wax's and Wayne's characters. It expanded on them in a really natural way from the ending of Shadows of Self, and um, the setting again. This is another example of where I find Sanderson's like the feel of his books and the atmosphere of his books to really stick out for me, because this isn't something I see discussed with Sanderson a lot, but for some reason it hits for me specifically, and the feel of this book uh, really resonated with me for whatever reason. And the ending isn't like the best Sanderson ending ever, but it is really good for what it is. So yeah, the Bands of Morning goes right about there. Secret History, B tier. I really like the character that it centers around. It was a really fun little novella. It did a lot of Cosmere world building. I like the development of the character who it focused on, and I like the bridging of gaps between Era 1 and Era 2 done by it, and also just the bridging of the gap between Mistborn and the larger Cosmere as a whole. So, because of that, I really like Secret History. I don't have a lot to say about it, but I do really enjoy it. And then after that, we get into the Lost Metal, which is my second least favorite um of the Era 2 books, but I still do really, really love The Lost Metal. My main problem with this book is because there are basically two major plot lines with this one. The first plot line is focusing on the entire Wax and Wayne, the main plot that the Wax and Wayne thing has happening, and this is a really cosmic connected book. But the second plot line is specifically having a lot of connections to Cosmere stories that we already know of and have experienced. And my problem with that plotline isn't exactly the cosmic connections. It's just I don't like the plotline because I feel like the problem I have with this and Sunlit Man is just it feels like he at that point he didn't know very well how to balance the cosmic connections with the wider story, and it felt like it showed in this one. But I don't think the cosmic connections were the problem with it. I just feel like it wasn't a particularly good plotline. The Wax and Wayne plotline, however, would have put it in second place. Like I would have liked this book more than Bantam Morning if it wasn't for that more Cosmere heavy plotline. I still do really like that Cosmere heavy plotline. I just find it a lot weaker. And but the Wax and Wayne plotline in this book is just phenomenal the whole way through. I love it. And uh a really emotional ending, some amazing moments throughout the entire book. It has this feel of just like urgency throughout the entire book, and I really felt that while reading it, and that's why I love it. Uh, it has one of the most like one of the Cosmere moments that I can just like imagine the most vividly, and that's why I just love that moment a bit. So yeah, the Lost Metal is at bottom of A tier. It would have been right above the Final Empire if it wasn't for that second plotline. So yeah, White Sand is worse than Sunlight Man easily. It's not good. It's again, it has the same problem as Sunlight Man, but it's just forgettable. Except it's not forgettable in a way that I can't tell you what happened. It's just like I can tell you what happened, but it's all incredibly mediocre the whole way through. Sunlight Man at least had some highs. Um, White Sand has none, and I'm tempted to move Sunlight Man up a tier just because of the existence of White Sand. Honestly, White Sand would fit more with the mediocre short stories than with Sunlight Man, which is saying a lot because I don't really like Sunlight Man. Alright, The Emperor's Soul, S tier. On my first read of The Emperor's Soul, I really liked it. On my second read of The Emperor's Soul, it blew me away. The Emperor's Soul is probably Sanderson's best actual writing the whole way through. Like, it's like Sanderson is known for his big, chunky books, and I feel like I would have liked this book even more if it was a bit longer. For what it is, though, it is still phenomenal. The Emperor's Soul is just brilliant the whole way through. First of all, it has some amazing character arcs, some amazing characters. Second of all, it's like one of the more thematically focused Sanderson books, and what it does with those, it it's just handled really well. The book I read before it too dealt with a couple similar things, and feel like that elevated the experience even more. Third, third, I it's just like every scene in this book is just like amazing from beginning to end, and there's a lot of dialogue in this book. Every exchange of dialogue is amazing. The final scene of this book lives in my head rent free. I love The Emperor's Soul. So yeah, Emperor's Soul goes an S tier. From here we go into my favorite subset. When Jesus Christ, is nothing in C tier. Hmm, there we go. Okay. My favorite subset of the Cosmere, which is the Stormlight Archive, and The Way of Kings is the best book in the whole Cosmere. It's in contention for my favorite book of all time. A lot of days it is my favorite book of all time, just because of how much I love this book. And it feels weird to say that it's my favorite book of all time, but it's also just so completely true. I love The Way of Kings from beginning to end. I don't think it would have remained one of my like at the top of my favorite books of all time if it wasn't for the reread that I did before when the truth came out. And there's something about this book that just blows me away each time I think about it, and that just gets me really emotional. Uh, and it's a specific feel that it has, and the specific Kaladin's plotline is the most special part of this book for me. Unlike most people, I do love every single plotline in The Way of Kings. I love Kaladin, I love Shallan, I love Dalinar, and Shallan is the one who gets the most flack, so we'll talk about her first. Shallan is legitimately like, if it wasn't for Winning Truth, she would still be like one of my favorite characters of all time. I think she is still one of my favorite characters of all time. Shallan, I just first of all, the basic premise of her plotline is so intriguing to me, so interesting, so fun to read as well. I love Shallan's plotline. Second of all, what actually happens is completely just I can't talk about it without spoiling it, but reading it after I already have a knowledge of the whole series just elevated that plotline that I already loved from The Way of Kings even further. And that holds true for almost every single scene in this book, not just because of like the foreshadowing that this book holds, like with the dead rattles and with the various like things that you don't know, but you do know after you've read 5 books. I mean, 4 books in the series. At the time I reread this book, there were only 4 books out, but also just like knowing where these characters will go, specifically Calvin. Like he is on some days, again, some days he is my favorite character of all time. He's only beaten out by Randall Thor. Randall Thor is my favorite character on more days than Kaladin, but sometimes it's wrong to put someone above Kaladin just because I love Kaladin so much. There's something about his character that just like draws me in every time. Like even my least favorite book for him, which is Oathbringer, is just amazing from start to finish. Each Kaladin scene, um, and The Way of Kings, just like is easily my favorite book for Kaladin, just because I love every scene he's in. I love his interactions with Bridge 4. I love his like reading his mental state. Like when Kaladin feels something, I feel something in this book. That is how brilliant it is. I also on my reread of the series, I got a lot more of the questions he was bringing up thematically, and I feel like that elevated my experience with the whole series as a whole, and Kaladin specifically. And he is the one who brings up a lot of these questions, and the way Sanderson utilizes his character to bring that about is just brilliant throughout the entire series. Second of all, the ending of this book is brilliant. There's one specific moment that I that just takes my breath away each time I even think about it. I love this book. It is so good. I don't want to talk about it much more, but there's something special about this book to me. And yeah, there we go. Words of Radiance is a lot of people's favorite book in the entire Cosmere, and I don't blame them. It is my actual personal least favorite Stormlight book, but it's still brilliant, as you can tell by me putting it in S tier, because Words of Radiance is like what Well of Ascension is to me for Mistborn, and that's what Words of Radiance is, but better. And second of all, this is like my third. If I ranked it based on like how good Kaladin in this book, this would be my third favorite. I think again, Words of Radiance is a specific turning point for the series because it changes so much. And Stormlight is different from something like Wheel of Time, where Wheel of Time there's a lot more gradual changes throughout each book, and it feels a lot more like one story. Stormlight, each book changes the status quo like dramatically. Uh, and Words of Radiance is probably like one of the most important for that specifically. And there is something about this book, like, and again, it's hard to talk about this one without spoiling it, specifically what I loved about it. But everything that it tries to do, it does magnificently. It takes Kaladin's character arc from the Way of Kings and expands on it in a way that doesn't feel like it's treading over the same ground again, which is something I feel like he does really well throughout the entire series. This is a criticism that some people have for the later half of the series that I completely disagree with. So I'll get into that soon. But I just love this book to bits, even if it is my least favorite Stormlight book. There are just so many moments that I think of in this book, and I go, wow, and I just love it so much. So yeah, from there we go on to Oathbringer, which is my second favorite Stormlight book. On my first read, this was actually my least favorite Stormlight book by quite a large margin. Um, Imagine my surprise on reread just how much I loved almost every single part of this book. First of all, the character that it focuses on is a character who has had a lot of mystery shrouded around his past throughout the end. It's Dalinar, who has had a lot of mystery shrouded around his past throughout the first two books. And the culmination of that and the answers that it brings are absolutely devastating. On my first read, I re- the way that we got the answer was what really hit me. On my second read, the fallout of that is what really impacted me. And I think that Sanderson wrote that immaculately. That is still my favorite. That was my favorite part of the book. On my first read, everything that was happening with this character, Dalinar. And on second read, that is still true. Outside of that, I just think this book builds up on everything that Way of Kings and Words of Radiance has set up perfectly. It has so many amazing moments. It even while its main focus is clearly Dalinar, it gives the exact amount of time that the other characters need, and it uses it perfectly. It has one of my favorite moments in the entire series. It has just so much great stuff going for it that honestly I don't even know how I. It was my least favorite of the five on my first time through. Of the four at the time on my first time through. I love Oathbringer to bits. Yeah. Then oh yeah, Edge Dancer exists. Edge Dancer is B tier. Yeah, its answer is B tier. It's a good novella. It's not the best. I like the character of Lift a lot more than most people do, I think. But even this one, I don't like. Again, I do really like this novella. It's not my favorite. Uh, I just do enjoy it. It's just pretty good to me. So yeah, I mean it's a novella, so it doesn't matter all too much. Yeah. Then Dawn Shard, I think I like a little bit more than Edge Dancer, so it's gonna go right above Ally of Law. The character that this focuses on, Risen, is a character that we have been following through all four Stormlight books up till this point, all three Stormlight books up to this point, and what it this book does for her, I think, is actually really well done. Uh, it focuses on Lopin more, and more Lopin. The Lopin is always acceptable. Um, I like what it does for the Cosmere as a whole, and I just think it's a really good little book. Uh, yeah, I like it. Then right after that, we have Rhythm of War, which is, in my opinion, the most underrated Stormlight book because I went into this book expecting it to be less good than the first three, and because that's the reputation it had built up. It was so many people's least favorite Stormlight book, and then when I finally sat down and read it, I was just blown away by it because of how good it was. Um, so many people were. I mean, now a lot of the things that people disliked about it were, first of all, uh, a lot of the more scientific magic system aspects of it. And another part of it was a criticism of Kaladin's character arc, which is like he was getting repetitive or something, which I wholeheartedly disagree with. Um, because this is my second favorite book for Kaladin. His journey through this book is like ridiculously well written, in my opinion. So emotional for me too. Uh, he has some of the best moments in the entire series in this book, and uh, the way and his final sequences in this book are just brilliant the whole way through, in my opinion. Uh, there is a specific mental state that he's in that is just so compelling to read, and I love him, and I love how he was written just for that. Um, Second of all, the scientific things. That plotline specifically brought a character who I really liked in the first three books into the forefront, and then made me really love that character even more. She is genuinely one of my favorite Stormlight characters now. uh, I love reading everything about that plotline because that character is in the forefront, and also because of another character that she had interactions with who I don't love quite as much, but I felt like her interactions with that character were so well written that I just have to love it. And there are so many other smaller moments in this book that I love. The only criticism I have of it is that I don't think the culmination of Shallan's character arc is the best written in this book. So yeah, uh, I really love Rhythm of War. I don't think it gets enough love. The final book, yeah, it's Wind and Truth. This book gets criticism a lot, and it's a controversial book. It's a very controversial book. Um, I love Wind and Truth. As you can see, it is my third favorite Stormlight book. If it worked out a couple of its writing style complaints and a couple of its dialogue complaints, it would be my second favorite. And it's the reason it can't be my first favorite is because uh, if it removed a couple plot lines that if it like made it, improved a couple, like removed a couple plot lines that I didn't like, it could have been first. I don't think it had a chance because those plot lines are basically essential and they kind of drag down the whole book with it. I won't say whose plot lines because they're kind of spoilery, but I didn't really like those ones. And then it took a character who I really loved in the first four books and made her feel kind of off, which is weird. And those are my criticisms of the book. Again, there's a lot of writing style complaints I have with this one. Uh, the modern language, I didn't care, honestly. I just had problems with other aspects of it. So that was what it was. Some characterization in the first 2 days, and characterization for one character specifically throughout the other 8 days. Outside of that, though, this book was brilliant. I love so much about this book that it's not even funny. I just think that Wind and Truth is a phenomenal book the whole way through. For most Stormlight books on my reread, most people say like the ending is the best part of Stormlight book. On my reread, I found like the first four books. I actually like the middle sections of the Stormlight books more than the ending. This book, the ending was far and away the best part of the book. That's not a bad thing because the ending might have been one of my favorite parts of any Stormlight book, just because of how, first of all, batshit insane it was. Second of all, because it was just incredibly well written for me. Uh, I loved the way that it wrapped up some character arcs. There was a specific problem I had with a character throughout the first four books that I felt like wasn't addressed in the first four books, and then went through the entire character arc of that character was specifically meant to address that, and I feel like it was perfectly done. I feel Sanderson has said he wanted the readers to feel like a sense of Sanderson. Sanderson has said before he wanted the readers to feel like the sense of unease or like shift, kind of shift in this book. Like it feels different to the rest of the Stormlight book, and I feel like he just pulled that off really well in this one. Second of all, it just has a different feel to the rest of the Stormlight books while also keeping in line with what made them so good. And I think that was done really well. Like amazingly well. Again, the character arcs conclusions was just amazing. Some of the most emotional moments. There are only a handful of books I can say that have like pushed me to the brink of tears. Like Rhythm of War and Wind and Truth are two of those books. I think Rhythm of War actually provoked like a whole tear out of me, which is a lot, which is impressive for a book, and it wasn't even for like a particularly big moment, which is even more impressive. Second of all, I just feel like this book just keeps getting better as it goes on. And while I do agree with a lot of the criticisms, the highs of this book are just so ridiculously high that I can't help but love it. And yeah, that's the entire thing. Thank you for watching this. I had a lot of fun with this. As you can tell, I really love Stormlight, and I do really, really love a lot in this series. So yeah, without further ado, see you later. Uh, Thanks for watching. Bye.